sustainability of our environment is also being threatened by the man-made phenomenon of global warming. Global warming occurs when heat and greenhouse gases are emitted into the atmosphere, causing a warming effect. Carbon dioxide, CO2, is the greenhouse gas that is the greatest contributor to global warming, and fossil fuels are the largest source of CO2 emissions: coal, oil, natural gas, and the like. From 1990 to 2008, there was a 39% increase in world energy use. Fossil fuels remain a dominant form of energy use, and during this period, sources of global energy consisted of oil, 35%, coal, 26.8%, and gas, 20.8%. Alternative fuels contributed much less, unfortunately. Solar and wind at only 12.9%, and nuclear power, which is controversial, at 5.8%. In order to limit the rise in the Earth's atmosphere to 2 degrees Celsius, the number that scientists claim is a risky target, to limit the rise of that number by 2015, the world will need to reduce its level of carbon emissions by 75%. And the world has been struggling to do that. For over 20 years now, there have been a series of global meetings trying to make global agreements on CO2 emissions. And so far, the world has not been able to agree. Since the release of the Brundtland Commission report, political leaders, economists, scientists, and others have been struggling to develop approaches by which individual nations and the world as a whole can become more sustainable. Some suggest that reforming the global financial system is the key to planet sustainability. Others argue for an emphasis on the conservation of natural resources. Perhaps the most ambitious approach to sustainable development is something called the whole systems approach. This approach argues that sustainable development must take into account the sustainability of economic, social, and cultural systems, as well as sustainability of the Earth's environment. While this approach seems ideal, its implementation requirements are complex and will need a long period of time to be fully realized. The approach to us which seems to make most sense immediately, the approach to sustainable development, is one that's being put forward by environmental scientists. There's a group, some of them are connected with the Stockholm Resilience Center, which is an excellent institution, and others with Monash University in Australia, that have compiled data that show that the stable functioning of Earth systems, including the atmosphere, oceans, forests, waterways, biodiversity, and biogeochemical cycles, is a prerequisite for a thriving, sustainable global society. These scientists suggest that the definition of sustainable development as laid out in the Brundtland report should therefore be redefined to mean, quote, the development that meets the needs of the present while safeguarding Earth's life support system, on which the wellness of current and future generations depend. This international environmental science team has identified environmental planetary boundaries that would be unsafe to transgress. These boundaries exist for 9 Earth systems: climate change, the rate of biodiversity loss, interference with the nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, stratospheric ozone depletion, ocean acidification, global fresh water use, changes in land use, chemical pollution, and atmospheric aerosol loading. The use of planetary boundaries is an important benchmark for guiding sustainable development efforts. Currently, there are more than 100 major environmental conventions that have been agreed upon over the past 50 years. upon over the past 50 years, while many of the agronomists suffer from a deficit of sufficient signals and/or a lack of regulatory enforcement. Because most environmental issues are transboundary in nature, they're global in nature, sovereign states are reluctant to cede jurisdiction to an external international regulatory agency. Here we have an interesting global governance issue. Perhaps the most significant and long-lasting international environmental agreements were the three conventions to UN Rio Conference on Sustainable Development. These include the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Convention to Combat Desertification, and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Some argue that a great deal of the path to sustainability will be achieved through sustainable urbanization. Currently, more than half of the world's population lives in cities. This figure will be pushed up to 70% by the year 2030. Also, more than half of the world economy is based in cities. So sustainable development is going to require smart cities, smart architecture, smart systems of transport, and smart systems for power and water use and the recycling of waste. Now, what can we as global citizens do to address these very important issues of sustainable development and environmental stewardship? We can investigate whether our countries and our communities have a sustainable development plan and whether that plan is being effectively implemented. We organize teams of efforts even in our own villages or communities. And if a plan is in place, we can join a campaign that advocates for improved implementation. We can join national or local commissions or citizen groups that work to promote sustainable development. We also can advocate with local and national officials and business leaders steps that our country or communities can take to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We can work with citizens from other countries to advocate for new international agreement on global warming. A year from now in Paris, all of the countries in the world are going to meet again for maybe the 7th time in the past 20 years to try to iron out a global agreement on climate change, and global citizens need to weigh in on this and advocate for such an agreement. Finally, we can make lifestyle adjustments that reflect a commitment to the sustainable use of the Earth's resources, use energy-efficient appliances, and use low-carbon forms of transportation. So I want to conclude by going over, we updated active learning assignment for Module 4 that we sent out, has an attachment link. Remember, Module 3, when we talked about gender equity, we started from Module 4, Sustainable Development Reverse. We're going to start from the global and work down to the local. So, for your active learning assignment, your first step is one of the 9 planetary boundary domains that we just got. Climate, diversity law, with fossil cycles, stratospheric ozone depletion, ocean acidification, global freshwater use, change in land use, chemical pollution, and air pollution. Asking each participant to select one of these. A global citizen assessment to prevent the crossing of the boundary that you selected. And make sure that your assessment answers the following questions. First, what are the indicators that the world community is using, say or not, the planetary boundary that you have selected has been crossed. Like we know in climate change, it's the warming rate of up to 2 degrees Celsius. If you don't change the boundaries, you need to identify for us the indicators of what the danger point is for crossing that boundary in terms of the sustainable development of our planet. Secondly, what do these indicators tell us about the current situation? Are things getting worse? Are they getting better? Are there particular areas or regions of the world that are seen as being most at risk? What are the causes for changes in these trend lines? Third, in what ways is your country contributing to or hindering global efforts to ensure that the planetary boundary domain that you've chosen has not been? And that's the basis of the active learning assignment. The process that you follow is similar to the ones that you're the first 3 modules. That is, by the end of this first week, write a draft summary that you can share with your course partner and mentor. We'll arrange Skype calls for you to go over the work that you're doing and ask any questions about that. And then a week from Wednesday, we'll have our online learning exchange where participants will have an opportunity to share the work that they've been doing. And I have to say once again that the work people have been doing on these active learning assignments for the most part has been outstanding. There was a suggestion made at the beginning of our course that we upload documents, resource documents for people to share. And so far, the best resource documents have come from you, our participants. So we hope you'll continue with your excellent work. So now I'd like to, I noticed it was really an excellent module. Anybody? I'd like to ask the participants who are particular whether they've gotten the new active learning assignment for Module 4 and have had a chance to review it and understand it and are okay with it. Stephen has no mic, but it's okay if you don't have mic. Using the chat function is fine. It's just as good. Okay, great. Ross gets it. Claire says she read half of it. Okay, good. All right, so everybody is good with it. And everybody has their new assignments. And does anybody have any other comments to make about the work that we've done to date? Any final thoughts on Module 3? I want to say that for me, what emerged from Module 3, I had a chance to read a lot of the active learning summaries, was the universal nature of the domestic violence and the violence against women issue. Seems to be a major issue almost no matter what country you're from. Oh, wonderful. We have Abdullah Ibrahima from Ghana. Abdullah, welcome. I know you can't see or hear us, communication, so that we can get our participants from Africa more engaged. Okay. Abdullah, any thoughts? Can you hear me? Okay. So let me ask any of the other mentors who are online right now, or Dick, any comments or reflections on the work in the previous Module 3 that you did with your participants? I know, Dick, you worked with Achu from Togo. Okay, got it. Okay, I found that he worked with Deborah Nima from Kenya and Kingsley from Ghana, mainly through email. So, yeah, if email works, then I think that's what we should try to use. It's interesting that in South Sudan, which you wouldn't expect to have a very strong internet connection, we've done quite well with our participant there, Oliver Michael, who we've been able to Skype with very clearly. I'm thinking out loud now. Difficult to hear. I'm thinking out loud now whether we might try to construct something simpler in the way of a chat room that maybe is easier for people to access than this Moodle site, which requires some bandwidth in order to gain access to. We'll try to explore that. As I've said many times, our organization is the Global Citizens Initiative, the most important issue we need to address. I know that some of the major internet companies, Facebook and Google, are also working on this issue. It's an important one. So I want to thank everybody for participating in today's orientation. Yeah, Beth says bandwidth, wealth disparity. Exactly, a big issue. A big issue. In fact, in Module 5, we're going to be talking about the next round of Millennium Development Goals, now called the Sustainable Development Goals. And I don't know whether anybody has brought up this issue of bandwidth, wealth, to touch with you. And good luck on Module 4. Bye-bye.